kind of voices. And the aim of this series is to document, publicize, and archive stories of Black architects and accessing the knowledge they've produced through their lived experience. And then also adding that missing voice in both the praxis and pedagogy of architecture, which I believe, and we truly believe, will enrich the discipline. And the whole point is through a project which falls under the TUT Department of Architecture and Industrial Design's Archive of Design and Architecture. We aim to systematically document architectural precedents of work done by Black architects. So at the end of it all, the story of architecture will remain incomplete until previously excluded stories are heard. And so the collective story of the profession is the stories of individuals in their diversity and in their multiple intelligences. So, and at the end of it all, I think we just have to realize that as a discipline, we are the story we tell. And what is that story that we're telling? And I believe that this public lecture series will bring a whole lot of some of the missing voices that we really need, and I believe that the profession will do better with. So I thank you. I'll just end it there and keep it short and sweet. Thank you.
So the program director is going to give us a sense of what's going to happen now, or because I don't like this uncomfortable silence, and I'm just stepping in to just make sure that there are no gaps. Program director.
Yes. Evening to everybody. So what will be happening now is that Dr. Patha will introduce our speaker tonight, Ms. Mvusi, followed by a conversation between the two. After she's presented for about 30 minutes, the conversation will be around more or less the same time. And then, given that we will then have 20 minutes then opening up to the floor. For everybody on Facebook, please do leave your comments between myself and Dr. Emmanuel. We will be looking at those as well as the ones joining today on the Zoom. We will be monitoring those questions in the comments, and if there are other ones who will be
yeah, if there are ones who have questions, we will please pick up your hand and then we can take it from there. So Mr. Mpatwa, please introduce our speaker.
Okay, thanks a lot. It's quite an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to introduce someone like Linda. In fact, when I was invited, I asked the question, where is she? Where has she been? What is she doing? I haven't spoken to her, I think, for a decade, if not more. So it is really a great pleasure, and I trust that we're going to be sharing in her wisdom today. As a matter of intro, I mean, where do you start when you receive 4 or 5 pages of a bio of projects? So I'm going to do my best to kind of synthesize this as best as I can. And I do think that in the world of social media, a lot of the detail will be found. I also saw in the SIA circulation, there's quite a write-up. But to me, the architect, Linda Mvusi, represents a lot of what South Africa is characterized by in terms of where we come from, but also where we are in terms of why should I be asking, where is Linda Mvusi today? And I hope that in a discussion like this, in a lecture series like this, we'll start unpacking some of these issues and some of these challenges. But speaking about her, she left South Africa, I think, as a very young person in 1961, spent 32 years in exile, lived everywhere in the world, firstly in Southern Africa, in the then Southern Rhodesia, and then moved to Ghana, Kenya, Zambia, and back in Zimbabwe again. But she's lived in Europe, she's lived in the US. She's the typical epitome of what South Africans of my generation largely have experienced. And she came back into the country in 1992 and setting up practice. When I look at the list of her buildings, about 90 buildings are listed over a 40-year period. And maybe just for the sake of completeness in South Africa, the most buildings that we can identify with that have been listed include the Apartheid Museum. She was partly involved in that. The presidential home of former President Nelson Mandela in Houghton, which we read just this weekend that it's falling into disrepair, sadly so. And she's been involved with the Park Station and the multi-transport mode at Park City. She's done 9 Soweto railway stations. That's amazing. And these are just really just a trickle of what she's done. But what I know her for are the buildings she's done in Midrand. I think she was kind of the first Black architect to, do projects for the corporates in Midrand at the time. And that's when I caught wind of her. In terms of education, she studied at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana, and then did a postgraduate at the University of Newcastle in the UK. She's born of a family of designers, and when I read what her dad was, Mvusi, as an interior design educator and a fine artist, and has been involved in the teaching of industrial design, and there's books and CDs, and Mom was an educationist, a headmistress and a gallerist. So she's been involved in a very creative kind of background, and she must be blessed to have gone through those early nurturing stages. And then both her brothers studied architecture. The younger one, Boris, unfortunately, passing in the US in 1982. And we have to remember those who fall through racial killings, which are still carrying on in America today. And we hope that time has healed you, Linda. I know how it is to lose a sibling. And then the other brother, Zama, also studied architecture and back in the country and is working in various fields, also as working in the ANC as one of the architects. Now, she's also an actress. The movie The World Apart, when I was in Europe myself, was the big story about apartheid South Africa. It was big in the screens, and at the time I didn't know it was her. I got to know this later, and she's also worked as a journalist in Zim. She's been a member of various boards in the period from 93 to 2011, including Science and Engineering Association of South Africa, Urban Foundations, Social Housing Company, been part of the Johannesburg Housing Company, and has worked for the municipality as well. She was CEO of the Tirisano Urban Village Development Consortium, and has been a judge in the annual design judging panel of the Design Institute of South Africa. And unlike many architects, she's really been publishing quite a bit, and her work has been published as well. So we're really grateful for that. But I think The most relevant is the recent documentation that is on social media, a radio interview that she did on creative ghettos that's available on YouTube, and a recent online lecture which is titled Undocumented Designs, Equity and the Social Contract. And I think those are all relative topics that we need to be engaging with as a country, as a profession, as students, as academics. It is my privilege to allow Linda Mvusi to share her wisdom with us, and welcome. I think you're on mute, Linda. Unmute yourself.
Oh, okay, down there. Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me? Great, thank you. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for today. I feel particularly honored. It's a privilege beyond description, and largely because it honors the university and the purpose of what a university is. And there's a very strange confluence of thinking right now in South Africa about the state of higher education. And so when Dr. Emmanuel phoned following an article on Facebook, I was truly, truly shocked. But first of all, I just want to thank Dr. Emmanuel for sending yourself over here. Yes, because this is a lot more comfortable than last month's Zooming, which I did on an iPhone, and watching the young people really cracking up at that I must be the last person who thinks they can do a presentation on Zoom on a phone and then actually doing it. This is a really great comfort, and I really do want to thank TUT for sending your Oratile over here to set this up, and apologies for the delay. What sparked this also was the university rankings coming out, and seeing that UCT, which has always been in the top 100 world university rankings, has actually slipped out to 103, but that all the other African universities have also sunk. And while TUT is 1 point ahead of my alma mater, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, it became clear just looking at what the criteria was, that there's two different criteria for the world universities and African universities. And African universities have been basing their criteria on-site, on-campus tuition. And it seemed to me that in a time of COVID, because we are intra-COVID, intra-pandemic period, and is not ending in 2021, that there needs to be a serious shift from tuition on-campus gatherings to investment in research and development. And so when Dr. Emmanuel Nkambule proposed ADA, it was extremely exciting that TUT was considering an archive. That is, we're generating primary research and development in-house here in Africa. And I just want to applaud TUT and the staff and the initiative for this. What I'd like to do is to start the talk by, are you all right? Okay. I'd like to start the talk by introducing the concept of positionality. And I culled this from a Trinidadian American woman lecturer, design thinker, in fact, Dr. Leslie Ann Noel, who starts off saying, who are you and who am I? Sorry, is that share screen? Okay. Should I? Okay, yes. And this share comes from last month, because I was rather taken aback when the word privilege as a description was applied to me. Unfortunately, I didn't react in the moment, but I have been thinking about it in the last month. And so the concept of, within design thinking, of positionality, I'd really like to share with South Africans and with everybody else, because essentially the Bauhaus concept of universal design, that is, you design for the masses, obviously does not apply in the real world. And as with people, countries, cities, towns have no single story. So when we gather around a table or a conference or a meeting, we need to ask ourselves, who are we here? Who do we represent? And not just racially and gender, but to look at class, to look at the detail of even our background in education. What kinds of languages and tools are we using to discuss a particular concept? And importantly, we need to look at who is excluded. How do we present ourselves? And then how do we pivot to articulate those who are not present in the room? Importantly, who, where, has, and is the power? It becomes extremely important, I think, especially for designers, especially for architects in this particular time, when so much of what we termed normality is upended. Often we come as architects, as designers, as professionals, from a position of who I am going to tell you what we're going to do, instead of opening up the discourse for participation, so that we all contribute and a round table to define not even the problem, but what it is that we want. And then it's also important, not just my generation, but particularly to the generations coming second and the generation after me, is to make space for anger. You know, we always need an angry voice in the discourse. So to summarize Dr. Leslie Ann Noel as an introduction to this lecture, is one, we need tools for designers to see the world in a more complex lens, and to stop simplifying. Simplifying does not clarify an issue. We must not assume that our given knowledge is valid, it's complete. Again, the single story. And also, let's consider how we show up in spaces. What else, apart from our voices and our content, are we signifying to others? And importantly, just to focus on why ADA is special, is to create safe spaces where all languages, all people are respected, e.g. spatial spaces, not just literary, music, fine art, etc. And a concept which has been growing with me as I've been preparing for this lecture is that life grows at the pace of relationships. And I'll speak to that and hopefully open it up as a concept for us to discuss. Shall we start with the first one?
You have control.
Okay, what do I touch? Okay. This is my first home. This is 1958, Durban, Gleblands. And I'm starting with this particular photograph of our home because for very many people, it's very hard for them to even conceptualize that this was the regular, I was going to say RDP, but that's contemporary, the matchbox house for the natives in the native location. And my mother, my father, myself. Often people upturn the photo to see what is a 2-year-old gawking at, because it's obviously an art book. And Zama, who was a baby, he was just under a year old. And I'm starting with this photograph because I've been grappling with, and particularly for South Africa, the tension between permanence and impermanence. Because this is 1957, and it's the home which my parents, when they married in 1955, and I was born at the end of that year, they were gifted by my father's mother. It's a home full of art, books, sculpture, and the chair on which my father has his elbow is part of a suite that quite a number of friends and family talk about. Is that it's furniture from the World Fair in Europe of that year, when the Scandinavian, the big Scandinavian splash on design, Scandinavian furniture, glassware, interiors, and so forth. So this is clearly a couple who, when they married, had intentionality and set out to build a family the way they intended, and to be agents of their family, to have agency. Eventually somebody said, Linda, your father painted the house. If I do this with these kinds of colors on his painting, he seemed to diffuse the house, so it wasn't very clear. Windows, doors, but somehow the space inside was far larger than similar houses. And they also talk about that there was a lawn. I'm like, what do you mean there was a lawn? Is this something special? They said, people used to drive slowly past your home just to see the lawn and to look at these colors of this house. Now, this house does not exist. Soon after we left South Africa, the house was declared a black spot. The apartheid government declared the house and the street, there were about 10 houses on that street, of professionals, but also one of the richest sangomas, I think that's what we call him, was one of the richest sangomas in Zululand, in Natal at the time. But the apartheid government decided this is too good for Africans, and removed all the occupants, even though they owned the houses, and staffed it with young white people working for the harbor. This is in Cleveland. And then shortly after that, that entire street was demolished. And for South Africans in particular, they will know that the name Cleveland is associated now with one of the most violent all-male single-sex hostels in South Africa. So the next one, do I press? Oh, I keep pressing it, okay. This is our home in Kumasi, Ghana, 1962. And the contrast is that this is a villa of permanence. It exists today. This is a photograph of our home in 1962. And there were 36 of them all along the ridge on the edge of the campus of Kwame Nkrumah National University of Science and Technology. A 4-bedroomed house. I just remember that there was a lot of light and a lot of space. So even when it rained, as children, we never felt constricted because there was so much space for us as kids to just move into. There were a lot of pajama parties with our primary school friends, but there were also quite of cultural and intellectual and political friends flowing in and out of this house. And many people remember this. And we lived in this house 1962 to 63 when we left Ghana for East Africa. And so here's the contrast. A house which has totally vanished, and a house of intentionality, because the product that generated these villas is what was Kwame Nkrumah, the president of Ghana's vision for his country, which was independent in 1957, and his thrust was a modern, industrialized African nation. So the entire campus is designed on this internationalist, modernist, light fluid, floating concrete pilates. That is the administration, including the university student residences. The swimming pool was, I remember as a child, was just a delightful, it was a delight. I just remember the diving boards, you know, they look like birds, like giant birds and I don't want to press the wrong thing. Where we go. Okay, I'll keep my finger there. It's my youngest brother, Boris. This is really the house of his childhood. And somebody just plonked a Sekou Touré hat, that was the president of Guinea, on him on this photo. And as I said, typical on a weekend, our house was full of, and as kids, we hosted parallel parties upstairs. So my brothers and I, we were the hosts, and you sort of learned this way of I'll come back to it because the term has, but this kind of open, fluid, social space, very, very secure, very, very safe, but in which as children, we also had agency, and we had free will, free form, and there was a lot of music in this house. There was obviously a lot of painting, a lot of art, a lot of sculpture, but there was also, in contrast, perhaps to the ethos of European Bauhaus, there was a lot of Ghanaian culture. So there were Ashanti stools, there were Mvusi and Peola rugs, there was Kente, there was, it was just such a lateral, multilateral, as well as modern, traditional, the crafts and intellectual products, all of them flowing into a kind of whole. So in many ways, it really was inevitable that my brothers and I would grow up to be creative intellectuals, basically. I'll go forward. West Africa, particularly, is one of those regions which is so deep with heritage and history, and mixed in together with modernity. These are just some of the slides of I would say traditional, but they're so well maintained that contemporary living people are part and parcel of maintaining and modifying and improving all these different structures. These are just shots of different places in the Sahel and Sahara, Mopti, and again, a totally different expression of building of 2 and 3 stories, which you certainly don't have to this degree in the Indian Ocean side of Africa. What I loved later when I went, and that is why I went back to Kwame Nkrumah for my first degree BSc, was not just that buildings were not the objects, but the spaces in front of buildings, the sort of piazzas, the sort of squares, marketplaces, and the kind of fluid life and varied life. and activities all in one day would happen in spaces where, if you stuck to the European canon, it would be, and certainly in planning language, you would call them slopes, space left over after planning. I'm just really sort of speeding through the kind of joy that I had in Africa and African spatial expression. This is the city of Harar in Ethiopia. Again, narrow winding streets, the sort of unified organic expression of space, both residential, retail, production space. And at the time that I went to university, and I'm coming back to visibility, was that African architects were incredibly visible. Apart from that, I grew up with designers and architects as a child. In the mid-1970s, Hassan Fadi was the big name because he designed, he's Egyptian, but he designed with the poor, not for the poor. That's more of his architecture. Other architects, African architects on whose shoulders one stands, except that Femi is not that old, much older than I, but he was the first Black president of UIA, Union International des Architects. And his buildings, this is the Total building in Lagos. And this building changed the skyline of Lagos. It signaled in the mid-1970s of Nigeria becoming a major power. And that's the base of that building. And coming back to what Emmanuel was saying earlier about we walk through these spaces without realizing that African architects have designed them, is that everybody knows the skyline of Nairobi. And this is the Kenyatta International Conference Center. And that little hut is the singular, brilliant difference that places this plinth of offices and the tower in Africa, because nowhere else in Europe, Asia, North or South America, would you have such a skyline. And this is David Motisa of Kenya. It's colloquially called the hut, you know, but what a hut. I mean, look at this. It looks like a spaceship, doesn't it? And this is the interior. In Swahili, you'd call it the boma. This is the auditorium. And look at the roof. I mean, this is the highlight, the epitome of the best of African basket weave art, basically. So yes, we are visible as African architects. And I don't know what has been happening since the International Women's Day, but suddenly there's an explosion of Black women architects. I love this. This is the first 500 licensed Black women architects in the United States, 500. And this absolutely delighted me because this is Ugandan women in architecture. This was on International Women's Day. Who knew that there were this many women architects of Uganda in Uganda? And are we visible or not? This time last week, I totally keeled over when this popped up. This T-shirt from 2 years ago, 2019, yes, from TUT students. And in the middle is, next to enter name here is LINDA MVUSI. I literally keeled over in shock. So we're visible not just to each other, but to the young as well, because this generation of TUT students would probably be what I'd call the grandkids. So thank you very much, TT. I'm using this banner to quickly launch into the talk. Artists, architects need to create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy. And given the history of South Africa, this is a clarion call to all design thinkers, designers, architects to step up. And at this point, I really want to talk about my brother, Zama. because when he graduated from Cuba in 1986, he joined, or should I say, he set up, and it's the only liberation movement that I know which had an architectural firm in it. He set up ANC's construction and planning department. And at his funeral, the obituary by his partner said, but also at the memorial, that on the scale of 1986 to 1995, he passed in 1995, Zama handled close to 1 billion rands worth in terms of real estate. And I do believe it, because we visited him in Tanzania, because he was responsible for all the liberation movement's real estate on all continents, and of course in South Africa. But we had a conversation with Zama, and he had a sense of humor, bar none. And when we visited him in Tanzania at Dakawa, the big ANC settlement in the interior of Tanzania, and he proudly, very, very proudly, took Mom and I around showing us the works. And he explained that everything came from the USSR. It was still the USSR at the time. It was before the Berlin Wall came down. And he told the story of how he'd made these trips to the Soviet Union for humanitarian aid. And it involved meeting the Politburo, negotiating with them until they said, well, it's winter, you have to come to the countryside, to the Dasha, and we'll talk about it. And he says, Sister, the snow was waist high. And there they were in a not a jacuzzi, what do you call a sauna, and negotiating over how much, how, and so forth and so forth. And that in winter, you steam up in this dasha and then run naked, roll in the snow, and dive in this iced over lake to chill and then dash back. And I'm like, you mean you ran butt naked through that storm? And he said, Sister, this apartheid system, we have to crush it. I did roll in that snow. And at the end of that, he said, well, the Russians said, okay, you can have that forest. Like a forest on 2 mountainsides. And he negotiated all the cutting, all the trimming, and all the logs which had to go to the harbor to be loaded on 2 cargo boats, which also needed the 24-wheeler trucks in the same boats to sail from the USSR down around through the Suez to the port of Dar es Salaam, how the port of Dar es Salaam had to be closed to offload massive timber on these trucks. It says that there was nothing else going in and out of Tanzania for about 3 weeks, because Tanzania, as you know, is not an industrialized country. So 24-wheeler trucks had to come from the Soviet Union. And when we were there at Dakawa, it was incredible. And it was incredible to see both the design, but also the implementation and these structures going up in Dakawa, Morogoro, and so on. So when I look at this banner, yes, it's an ode to my brother. When I left, when I graduated from Ghana, I was really pumped up. BSc design and the top prize, but also I left having 2 jobs offers in Kenya. So Ethiopian Airways to Addis Ababa down to Nairobi. And the first job was with David Motisa, who I've introduced, of the Kenyatta International Conference Center. The second job offer was from a Scottish firm, a major Scottish firm in Kenya, Dalglish Lindsay. And when I pitched up for the meeting, Mr. Lindsay just put a hard hat on me, asked what size boots do I have, and says, well, one of our, I think it was a 24-story building next to the Hilton in town had burnt. And he says, let's talk, let's go to the building, you will inspect the building with me, and we'll talk on the way. I came out of that, I mean, I came out at the end of the day all sooty and covered and gross. But I learned two things from him. Stand by a building. Architects, you stand by your building. When everybody's running away from the building, you grab the blueprints and you run to the building. So between the two, I took the job with Dalglish Lindsay, who had offices in Cairo. Mother said, no, there's a war with Israel there. Lebanon said, Linda, there's a war in the Middle East. Athens said, hey, there's a military junta in Greece, you know. So eventually I just said, and they said, well, there is a job in that we're doing, the Pamodzi Hotel in Lusaka. Walk in there and start. The Pamodzi Hotel is, I'd say it's one of the most superlative hotels in Lusaka, Zambia. And judging from Zambian friends, it is the premier hotel in that capital city. But what I'd like to highlight here was that the engineers were Ov Arab. Ov Arab at that time were huge around the world because they were the engineers of the City Opera House roof. And as I sat down designing, and automatically I checked mathematics, the engineers' calculations. I was told that that's what architects do. And for heaven's sake, the calculations were wrong. I must have checked those calculations 6 times and breaking into a sweat because this is Ov Arab. And the office manager, who was also Scottish, said, you do know who Ov Arab are, you know, you're going to make the call. I'm not going to call Ov Arab and tell them that their calculations are wrong. So I checked again, recalculated, made the call. And within 15 minutes, the courtyard was full of Land Rovers and British guys in khaki and what have you, tumbling out, going, yeah, what? I said, sit down, here's your calcs, here's my calcs, here's a calculator, what? And they were so shocked. Says, you're right. These columns are under reinforced. I'm pointing this out also because of the questions which came through from prior to this lecture, is that as an architect, you have to stand by your design. You have to stand by your truth, because in the end, that is what you have, your reputation. And the Ov Arab story has followed me throughout my professional life. When I went to Britain for my second degree, Ov Arab headquarters in London phoned up and said, we want to be the engineers for your thesis. They just phoned up. So in my final year, every fortnight, I'd take the train down to London from Newcastle, go down to the East End, to the financial district. They had offices next to the Lloydsburg building there, and spend the whole day with these engineers. And they did, and my thesis was on Adobe, you know, and I learned so much from them, and they from me. And when I graduated, the head of office there, he was one of those who were, you know, so we had dinner in London where they congratulated me. Fast forward to South Africa. The building which Luanda mentioned in Midrand, those engineers were Ov Arab. So we are followed parallel paths, and And this is the other big thing which resonated with me from Dr. Leslie Ann Knowles' positionality about life grows at the pace of relationships. It's almost like a highway. When you enter a highway from the off-ramp, you move in the same posse of cars until you get off the off-ramp. So build relations, build relationships, strengthen those relationships, not just with sister and brother architects, but across the engineers, the QSs, because we're all a team. We don't do this individually, it's a team. People don't know their true power. Okay, let me just go back. The questions which came from, I think they were mostly students or young architects, were, how did you do it? Do it, I'm not quite sure what that means. How did you navigate architecture studies and employment? I think I've answered that. How did you succeed in private practice against all odds as African, female, internationally in South Africa, on your own? How did you get paid? And several were, how did you get paid your fees in full? How did you get paid an equal salary? I think I've answered that. How did you deal with discrimination, sexism, racism, patriarchy, and then in South Africa, government tenders and corporations? How do you, so that's how I grouped most of those questions as they came through. And what I'd like to do, because they are serious questions and they point to, here I'm really focusing on the young people, is that you need to know, first up, know the value of your design. The first time Zama and I realized that our brains were wired in the same way. We just moved to Lusaka because mother had been promoted to head Zambia's flagship high school. And Zama was 17, I was 19, and I had worked 1.5 terms teaching art and maths. So I had cash from the government payroll. I don't know how I got a work permit in that country, being a foreigner, but they slapped together a work permit and there I was. And I said, let's go treat mom, you know, let's just say thank you, you know. So we went into town as a family, the 4 of us. And Limbadas would probably be, I don't know, it would be like the macro store here in South Africa. So it's this big Limbada emporium. And we're quite shocked when Mr. Limbada said, hi, Lex. My mother's name is Lex, and mom's was like, hi, Limbs. It turns out that they knew each other from Alice from Fort Hare. At that point, we didn't realize that Fort Hare wasn't just for Africans, it also had mixed race people and Indians. But in the aisle, I called Zama over, said, Zama, come over here. There's sisal mats from India, and there's 2 sizes. And it didn't take, there was very little conversation with us because we could see that 2 widths of the small one were the equivalent of the length of the larger size. And then we sort of spaced it out, but not too obviously because, you know, shoppers and so on. So I said, okay, let's buy 15 of one and 30 of the other. And Limbada said to mom, Lex, how many doors do you have in your house? Because these are doormats. Mom just zipped her mouth shut. We loaded even on the top of her car like a truck. And she kept saying, this is so embarrassing. But when we got to the house, we spaced it out because we didn't have to speak, because we actually created like a safari lodge type carpet. I mean, it was like 4 inches thick of bleached, beautiful sisal. And so Zama and I, we drove back to fetch the balance. But in the meantime, a Danish friend, he was a mechanic, popped in. He saw the layout and he dashed to Limbada, and he arrived just after we'd left, and he found the price doubled. And just as he left, a third visitor to the house, a Mr. Mpeshe, whose sons, one of them is an architect, were great friends of my brother's, he dashed out and he found the price quadrupled. So, and in those days on a Saturday, shops closed at 1 o'clock. And it was our first, as teenagers, it was our first light bulb that it's the design that has the value, not the mats. Because in the space of 90 minutes, the prices of those mats had gone up 400%. So I would say, know the value of what you design. And copyright, reproduction rights, they belong to you, the creator, the author, the originator of the design. The product may be bought by somebody else, but you own this. This is intellectual property, it's yours. And then about money, let me just delve into money. First of all, there are laws, and use them. Use them to the full might of the law. We're very fortunate in architecture, in the profession worldwide, in that our profession is legislated, it's gazetted in South Africa. So the fee scales and taxes and everything else are clear. They're public knowledge. It's accessible. You use those scales. There is absolutely no reason for anybody to pay you less because you're female, or less because you're Black, or less because you're a foreigner. And I would say respect the foreign professional who has left their country and is working in your country, because they do so at a premium. I was very well paid in Africa, in independent Africa, at a time when I didn't even think that, I wasn't even thinking of, I was just so amazed that as a foreigner, as I'm actually being employed. But those countries respected my labor. So I cannot turn around in South Africa and disrespect labor, whether it is South African or not. And I would say over the course of since 1992, I've probably employed, I can't recall, perhaps a dozen, perhaps 1.5 dozen. And most of them, when I arrived in South Africa in 92, I played a trick on apartheid South Africa. I wrote them a letter saying that I cannot find the expertise in South Africa. This is 92. So I want work permits because I need to import expertise. And they, being white South Africans, they obviously thought I was referring to Africans. It never occurred to them that I could possibly employ white people. And they gave me the work permits. And I imported staff architects from Eritrea, Ethiopia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, to staff my office, Mvusi Architecture and Design, in 1992. Pay your people well and pay them on time. In private practice, even if you have to forego your income, pay your people on time in full. I'd also say use institutions. And here institutions involve not just professional institutions, banks, airlines, these are institutions. I'll give the example of banks. Working in London, there used to be these glossy, really silly, trashy women's magazines. But there was one called Cosmopolitan, which would sometimes have an article on work, and it said 10 most important men. Obviously, they didn't think bankers were women in your life. Take your bank manager out for work. Now, I had an account at Lloyd's Bank in Oxford Street, only because that's where my bus from West Hampstead to Brixton or Camden changed. So I went in, I wrote, asking if I could take him out for lunch. And he was so shocked and he was so delighted. He said, yes, miss, I'll go out with you. So we talked, I don't know what we talked about, probably banking or something. But there was a personal contact between us. He, as the bank, they knew me. Actually, they knew me because mine was the smallest account. So when they reconciled accounts at the end of the day, I had this tiny account. So of course they knew the smallest account. That's how they knew me. But when I was in the States fighting a 15-month battle to divorce husband number one, my witnesses were Lloyd's Bank. They piled in there together with American Express, with all the documentation to show that I'd fully paid and more than paid totally, and this man hadn't supported me with 1 cent. And who knew a bank would do that? When I returned to South Africa, because it was rather precipitous, and I had a week to leave, my bank, Grindley's Bank, called me in, and they opened a line to London, Lloyd's Bank. And both these bankers were incredibly concerned about my returning. It's still apartheid, Miss Mvusi, it's still apartheid. So they said, okay, when you get into South Africa, go into the bank of your choice and have that bank call us. And here are our private lines, both Grindley's in Zimbabwe and London. I arrived here, I go to Standard Bank, an African man in a guard uniform tackles me. No black people are allowed. So I've been a basketball player all my life. I just dunked around him into the bank and went to the inquiries. And they said, no, you're a black woman. You can't open an account. You need to bring a teacher who's a man or a preacher who's a man to open the account for you. So I walked outside to the payphone because I had like a bag of coins because I'm calling, it was a trunk call. You have to tell the people in the line, sorry, I'll be sometime. I called them. And Lloyd's Bank phoned to a Standard Bank in Yeovil. And this short, portly, white South African man ran out, said, are you Ms. Mvusi? Said, yes. Says, come in, please. Do you want tea or coffee? He opened the bank account and I didn't even have money on me. I was going into inquiry, opened the bank account and put in overdraft. So in fact, he gave me money when I hadn't even deposited, and everybody was very shocked. But there you are, you know. Use institutions. I use that as an example. Your bank is there for you. Use it, you know. About being paid, let us remember that if wealth was the inevitable result of hard work and enterprise, every woman in Africa would be a millionaire. Gender misogyny does exist. Here I'd like to, oh dear, Oratila, the video is not working with. Hopefully some of the questions which came up, oh, it is, okay, yes. Because essentially a lecture should be about design. And how do I restart this again? I particularly wanted to feature this building. It's the largest building I've done in terms of new floor area. Oh, is that how I did it? Okay, yes. This is the Ministry of Higher Education building in Zimbabwe. And it's based on Great Zimbabwe, Munamatapa Kingdom. And it's the education services. I think I'm going to need you a lot closer to get on to the next. Yes, with. So it's a 4-story office complex in a horseshoe. We can move on to the next one. And again, using the materials and technology available in Zimbabwe at the time. We're not importing materials here. This is within the concave, convex spaces between the curvilinear and the warehouses. This is inside of the horseshoe-shaped office. You can run it, yes. And the importance of this particular slide was that I wanted to avoid air conditioning. So I used these fins both to cool the facade, and we can run again, and also create deep shade and cross ventilation in this complex and the two there are the shot. Do I press up here? Okay, yes. And at the bottom of the, in the opening of the horseshoe, that is the specimen preservation laboratories, super sub-zero. With the entrance is between the drums, again, using this curvilinear motif to create space. That's the inside of the auditorium to the right of the entrance. And this is teacher education preparation. And from the north, this gives an idea of the span of the works, spanning towards the warehouses, again, based on the kind of horseshoe shape of what most people recognize as Great Zimbabwe, but also how, in terms of block planning, those ruins suggested the sort of urbanity back then, 800 years ago, and in the suburb. Fast forward to South Africa. This is a Tirisano urban village. This is Johannesburg CBD. At the bottom, you can see Newtown. And I don't know where I got the energy to do this. Perhaps I was inspired by the Standard Bank manager opening my bank account and giving me an overdraft. Later, I deposited money in it. But this was one of those, and you can do this when you're focused about how to use the income fee income in your firm, was that I needed to design a big idea to change the course of thinking about what Johannesburg CBD was going to be, and to create these spaces where freedom necessarily had to be at. So this complex, we did a lot of land options. Part of it was a post office. Some of it was a brick company, Barlow, I think. We did a lot of land assembly. And this is a mixed income, mixed use development proposal, basically based on what I refined, which is the urban village model, which is basically circles of different uses: residential, work, leisure, education, production, manufacturing, tossed in the air, but overlapping, diameters of 10 minutes each, 15 minutes for adults by any mode, whether it is car, walking, and everything else, and 5 minutes for children. So there's schools, there's creches, there's kindergartens, but the whole point about an urban village is that you can be born there, grow there, live there, school there, work there, and the access in terms of the access in terms of being in the CBD, this was designed to energize and give that sort of va-va-voom to Johannesburg CBD to be this future city. I hate the term future city because it means something else in planning, but to be this democratic space where and this is an overview of Tirisana. It's now called, part of it is called Brickfields, and you probably do recognize it because eventually it was speeded up in time for the 2010 FIFA World Games, including the park, but not the lake that we had envisaged. And as somebody said, oh, you did the Nelson Mandela Bridge. Well, yes, but it sort of curves if you call it, and then so on. But all of this we did in parallel. And I do believe that it's one of the reasons why the western part of Johannesburg CBD works so well, both with the Newtown Cultural Precinct, which I was involved in the conceptualizing and designing under Christopher Till, who was then Director of Arts and Culture at Johannesburg City Council, Tirisana, which was self-started, and I brought in US companies, Davis Brody Architects from the United States, and also Tibbles Monroe, again, relationships. They flew people into my office to design this, and this particular 3D perspective was done in the New York offices in Manhattan. And 3 bridges back, you can see Park Station with, and in parallel, almost not quite as a relay, the Transnet commissioned me after the Soweto 9 railway stations to be the lead designer. I just found the letter to be the lead designer for Park Station. And Stark Foster, the biggest established practice, were the production architects. And we worked very well on this, both conceptualizing it and supervising the construction of it. That's a day shot of Park Station. And here's a night shot of Park Station. And then forward to Luyanda, I do believe this is where we met because you flew in from Berlin, visited my offices, and you said you'd heard about this building and read about it while in Europe, and you asked to see it. And I do believe that we drove out and you had quite a number of comments about it. This was designed initially, the idea, again, ideas come from everywhere. I've been teasing the idea of the Rubik Cube because essentially the core of it is that the 27th cube, the inner one, doesn't move. So I developed a house called the Rubik Cube House, which was a cube with a diagonal staircase. And whichever way you configured the 3 stories, it was a 3-story cubic house, compact, designed for a Soweto standard plot. But whichever way you configured the plans and the floors, the staircase was fixed. And I use this concept of space making in terms of cubes and diamonds to design this building for Anglo-American Corporation. And this is the video. Oh yes, okay, sorry. The video, it's static. Huh?
Might be an image.
Okay. Oh, no, this is a video, sorry. Sorry, okay. Okay, can we go to the one before? With, okay. Yeah, this one is a video.
I think it's an image. It's a video.
Yeah, it's a video. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. It's a building which is very difficult to photograph. So I was really glad that we did this in 2018, it was summer. And do I just press again? Okay. Inside this double-story exterior corridor, again, using diamonds on an axis. Beneath the staircase is a diamond-shaped pond, which was empty at that time. And then on the axis, the green outdoor space, again, the sound isn't muted, but the landscaping I designed also on the diamond space. So you have these three outdoor rooms, both inside the palisades, and again, these are the corridors. And you can see at the bottom of the footing of the double volume columns, we have theater lights, uplighting, and to the left, those wall lamps. A friend reminded me to state it, was that the suppliers said there were no exterior lamps in South Africa, would have to import from Italy. And I said, no way, we're not spending the client's money in Europe. Here are the specs, go to Zimbabwe, go to the industrial area, get these quotes from these three companies. And so they arrived 2 weeks before completion. And so there's an international story to this building. But again, I would stress, know your environment, know your suppliers, know your region as much as possible. Stop specifying components which have to be imported. We've all seen what's happened in the Suez with that cargo ship blocking. We have to invest in our economy, and the construction industry is a major spearhead in terms of the economy. My plea to designers and architects is specify locally, work with manufacturers, design with them to manufacture as much, and it's possible, 100%. This is 100% South African with the input from Zimbabwe, building with. And I'll just end up with the Apartheid Museum. That's an exterior, because this was in this century, exterior overhead shot of the Apartheid Museum, which was completed probably around 2004-05. The entrance and the entrance ramp. And I think I have concluded. Am I in time?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay. That was a hop, skip, and jump over 30 minutes. And hopefully any other questions or any other details will come in the conversation and Q&A afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Linda. I think you've taken us through a journey. And what I think is interesting, though you picked up on this at the end of your talk, that most of the things you spoke about were actually not necessarily the stuff that we are taught or we teach. It was not about architecture in the sense that we've come to engage with. You talked a lot about experiences and things that have influenced your own thinking. But the one I'd like to start with, and I'll be guided by Oratilo and Emmanuel on this in terms of time, because I don't know how long we have, and I would like to have the participants asking rather than me bumbling along with you. But I think one of the areas that I'd really like you to cover and talk about, just taking you back to your, almost like your opening statement around the state of education. And by that, I understand the state of architectural education. Let's leave the others. Now, you spoke a lot about the importance of research and development as going to be in focus more and more. But you also spoke a lot about your experiences in West Africa, and you seem to have a particular interest and understanding of how architecture in West Africa, those buildings that have actually sustained themselves through time, have very specific qualities. And what strikes me, and the question I want to pose to you is that I don't think that stuff is taught. I don't think those buildings feature much in terms of how we understand buildings. So my question to you is, do you think that there is enough that is being communicated to students of architecture about the role of architecture in the continent? Because when I came back myself, I started hearing voices here in South Africa which said there's nothing like African architecture. So I just want to just get a sense from you what you think and whether you think we're doing enough. And unfortunately, I'm not going to blow my own trumpet in terms of my own beliefs. I just want to get from you what your thoughts are on this, and how does this relate to the state of architecture and teaching in our country and maybe even in the continent?
The short answer is no, and particularly in South Africa. I am fortunate to have been exposed to universities in East Africa, West Africa, and also the newer faculties of architecture, both in Zambia and in Zimbabwe. And the curriculum, the content of their degree courses compared to South Africa, it's like chalk and cheese. In South Africa, it's a story of omission. And the short answer is that we must commit. If there's an omission, then we need to have a commission. We need to, I mean, I'm talking about commission as a verb, not as a body or committee or whatever. Yes, we need to actively put in both the content, which is the books, the intellectual product. We also need to initiate, which was quite common in East and West Africa, forays to survey historic and heritage buildings. And right now, I'm very, very excited about some of the initiatives happening in Ethiopia, where history and heritage, ancient, you know, is being grasped and put in the foreground by the Ethiopian Association of Architects. We don't, or at least in where I am, I don't see those initiatives where, and I think there's 17 schools of architecture and design in South Africa, but certainly in terms of output, I don't see the publications of particular building types being researched and published. There's a lot of, I don't want to sound dismissive, there's a lot of sort of psychobabble in the sort of preambles that architectural students, and I've judged a few architectural competitions, especially student work, which refers to things which you really can get on the internet, you know, but nothing about here. And in Southern Africa, we have all the different, I have not even seen a study on the stone architecture of the Basotho in Lesotho, let alone in the Kalahari, the Kalahari, you know, and given the kind of attention that I've focused on the Sahel and the Sahara, there is so much room for inquiry, which is why I was really, really very excited by this initiative, this ADA, to focus on research, because it's not even just in terms of the academy, it's for the profession, it's for development. It affects town planning, new towns, even the way cities spatially can be developed. I hope I've answered you.
Yeah, no,
we have work to do. We have work to do. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a discussion, Linda, and it's a discussion that people who know me will know I'm quite passionate about, because I do think that there is this sense of omission, and I mean, I would go so far as to say that even our discussion around sustainability and green architecture and stuff is actually kind of overlooking a lot of what actually is the context of Africa and how buildings have been put together here. It looks at other things and mechanical systems and all these things. Yeah. So I think you're right. There's a lot that we need to do. Now, when
just to top on that, with a bit of humor, the Bridgehead building in Midrand, there was a lot of consternation that the roofs looked like Basotho hats, you know. And I said, yeah, they are shaped on the Basotho hats, but they were shaped that way because there's vents at the top, which in reality, after the building was completed and were measured, that the entire building did not require air conditioning, because the speed of extraction at the apex of those Basotho hat profiles, the extraction of hot air surpassed the AC units. So it made the AC units redundant.
Yeah. So I mean, there is something to say about, you know, how we teach architecture and what are the important things to teach. So in that, I think I would agree with you. I know we've got about 35 minutes remaining, and I wouldn't like to hog the space, but the other issue that I'd like to take you on is, you mentioned your late brother Zama. I was not aware he passed also in 95. I was still outside then. That he I know the fact that he was working within the ANC, and he was very much involved with Takawa in Tanzania and Morogoro and all this. Now, my frustration is, I think if you go to Luthuli House today and you try and ask anyone there about architecture, I doubt you'd find anyone. And the question is, what have we done wrong whereby we have abandoned things that we actually started with very good intentions, but we seem to have abandoned all those things, and we are not looking at the role of architecture as an integrator in society, as a contributor to integration and spatial transformation and all these things. And we're only talking politics. I mean, I have my views on this, but I'd like to hear your views in terms of, you know, where do you think we are in this front? Because I look at all our policies, whether it's your people's housing policy, I'm involved in that space, and I don't feel that these are actually reflecting any of the values that I believe in as an architect and as a Black person, as an African. And I'm just wondering, what should we be doing to deal with this, and what are your views on it?
Listening to you, my first question is, who is we? you know, going back to positionality. Because if you're referring we, Luthuli House, that is not a homogeneous organization as one sees on television, you know. And it could be not just in terms of construction, but or our sector. I think it affects everything. Health, education, our trade relations are skewed. They are anti-people. If I go back to that slide, or I don't want to touch any more buttons, but there was a meme which I put that, you know, people don't know the power. I know, Oratila, can you find that? I don't know. Because I think it answers your question, that people don't know the power which they have. And I particularly want to answer you with this particular image.
The one with the kind of bridge thing.
Yes, except it's not a bridge, it's a cantilever.
Cantilever.
And yes, and that's it here, is that, and I hope I answer you with that. Is it true? Okay. Because we don't need a stadium. Yes, that's it. Yes. We don't need a stadium of people to all say, yay, Amandla. You know, if you look at this, it probably takes about 6 more people to step off that plank. And anybody remaining, including the speaker at the podium, topples into the abyss. And on that, because my Amandla days are, I hope I've answered you. Yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously I have my own thoughts, and I'm just reflecting on the state of our society, and the fact that there are certain discussions we've just missed, ignored, or completely abandoned. And
again, I would say perhaps we need to splinter into different parts. That is, instead of simplifying, let's be complex. That is, who is the we? Back to positionality, because one of your comrades in Berlin, and I still get angry at how he died, Gandhi Maseko.
Yes.
I mean, there were about 8 or 9 of you, Black architects, African architects out in Berlin. And I think about half of you had been under Zama's architecture practice in Dakawa. And that's where I first met Gandhi. And Gandhi died in his car in the middle of Johannesburg because ANC government did not pay fees for the job that he had done. And he wasn't technically in debt. They hadn't paid him the fees. He had to let go staff. He had to let go his office. His family broke up because he couldn't pay the rent, mortgage on his home. And he was living in his car, waiting. So I get angry every time some damn politician gets on TV and says, no, the payment for government, 30 days, 90 days, 100 days. Stop it. Stop lying. Stop lying. Don't commission architects to do work when you have no intention whatsoever of paying them. And I would say to architects and designers, say no. You know which clients don't pay. Say no, say absolutely no. The other quick thing, and I just want to give an uplift to this, was that when I was working in Lusaka after graduating, and I guess it was a bit of a shock for most people living in Lusaka because I'd been a child there and then a student, and now, whoa, she's back and she's actually working as an architect and her own staff housing and all the rest of it. And I remember that President O.R. Tambo sent some MK people to come visit me and I said, I'm at work. You can't visit me at work. And said, well, can we come to your house? So they drove over to Ibex Hill, where I was living. And I wasn't sure what they wanted to see me about, but it was very clear that this is MK, this is the military arm of, the armed struggle. And so made tea, coffee, and so their request was, could I join the movement? But I said, I was born in the movement. What do you mean join? They said, well, we thought you could help us, And I said, help in what way? Said, well, maybe we can give you plans of buildings so that we know how to bomb them. And I just was livid. Said, bomb? Said, I'm an architect. I create buildings. I don't bomb buildings. And I said, you're not going to defeat apartheid by destroying, So why don't you just ask me to design something for you? And I'll design it so beautifully that the beauty of it will just demolish, it'll just cut the legs off apartheid. And incredibly, it was 4 years later, there was the ANC asking me to design their headquarters building in Harare, Zimbabwe. So somebody listened. So that's what I'm saying, breaking down this we, let's individuate this. There are people listening. They're probably not in the places that we're asking questions. And I think there is hope. I think we're in such a tight corner in South Africa that there's no way else except to go up.
Yeah.
And this is the call of action to design thinkers. We got to think our way out of this. Yes.
Yeah. So the last question I will have, so that we can open up, is really one that even got me to agree to do this. When Emmanuel called me and asked me whether I could do this, well, I actually agreed because I wanted to be invited to the panel. I didn't want to be the one introducing you. But one thing I said to them, of course, I was pleased that I could play that role, was that one of the things that is wanting me to do this is because I think that there's also another disconnect in our system, and this disconnect is around academics and practitioners actually not being in sync. And I said, I'm going to do this for the very reason that I think we should be working more together, because I've also been involved in my practice, and I've been building a practice which I've reached a point where I don't think where it's going right now. And I've been of the view that even when I did get involved with universities as well, just like you do, either as an external examiner or giving the odd lecture, there's always this discrepancy or this huge gap between us practicing architects and universities. And it's something that is worrying me, and I wonder what your thoughts are, because I think if we do not break that chain and create different relationships, this is going to be at the cost of the students who come out of university, because we employ them, I employ them, I know what I get from universities, and it is quite an issue to look at the quality of students that are coming out and how long it takes us to actually get them to be where you'd like them to be. Because a lot of the things, the space I'm working in, I'm not working in big commercial buildings and stuff, is one that needs certain skills. And those skills are not offered at university. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that in terms of how could we deal with that disconnect?
I'm open to the conversation. This has been bothering me for almost the 30 decades that I've been back. It's 29 this year, 29 years. And hopefully there'll be some suggestions in the Q&A, because I'm also searching similarly. But, you know, I would also circle it and say it's highly likely that this is a particularly South African problem, academia. I am hugely inspired by my peers and those who were graduates ahead of me at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. And I'd like to give a shout out to Professor George Nsifo, because he left the deanship of the Faculty of Architecture this year to go to Liberia to start a new Faculty of Architecture, ground up. And this year he started with 28 students. And he was approached by a woman Liberian architect on the sidelines of a conference to ask him, please, the war decimated academia, decimated the college, in fact. Could you come over? And on the basis of that conversation, he resigned, and this year has started building from scratch, from a war zone in Liberia, Monrovia, this Faculty of Architecture. And I would say perhaps we need to step outside the sort of nationalistic box. There was in 1961, the Inter-Africa Universities Scholarship Fund. And its purpose was to finance scholarships for African students in different African countries to study, not in Europe or in the States, but to study in other African universities as foreign students. And they pay the premium with. And in its first 10 years, Inter-Africa, that scholarship fund, and it was funded entirely by African countries. And sorry, there was AAI, America Africa Institute, which put in funds intermittently, depending on whether it's a Republican or a Democratic government. But they produced more than 2,000 highly educated Africans as foreign students in other African countries, also injecting funds into those national universities. And plus 2,000 in 10 years, they had produced for Africa the equivalent of what some of the stronger universities had produced in that 10 years for their own country. And I would say, perhaps we need to go upriver and look at some of these institutions which have worked, because part of what will help us break out of the stasis, paralysis in South Africa, is to get out of our valley, cross the crest of the mountain, and go see what another country is doing, and to work with them, you know, I'm also searching, which is also why these university rankings, both the world and the Africa rankings, have always intrigued me. And I've followed the rise and fall of institutions. But I'm open to the conversation. And I think in South Africa, there's quite a number of thinking citizens who are equally concerned. We have to get out of this cul-de-sac. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have to. Mm-hmm. So I'm just reading through the chat box. I'm actually not picking up questions more than comments. Everyone is just so grateful and excited by the lecture you've given and the insights you're sharing with us. Yeah. I have one here from Kevin Bingham. Excellent presentation and discussion. Thank you. The issues raised on African theory, heritage, and related research are critical areas of focus in our architecture schools. Let us push harder. One from, I'm not sure whether this is in Tulisa or who, says the skills that I've referred to used to be guaranteed on tech students. Sadly, this is no longer the case anymore. And going further up, one says, I agree, there's a great need and wealth of opportunity for historical, cultural, and social research leading to publications to enhance and enrich the decolonization of the curriculum movement and initiatives across the African continent. Why is there reluctance and hesitation in this? Is this related to a general resistance to transformation within the profession and the academia? So I think mostly it's hardly like real direct questions, but I think part of the discussion is about you know, how do we get through this kind of sense of frustration and stagnation that we all kind of facing? Because I mean, perhaps people expect in lectures like this to kind of find, you know, design theory and all these things, but I think the reality of it is that there's a lot that is not being talked about that is of interest to people. And I think we need to find ways, and I think this dialogue for me is one of the first important steps that we need to take. And fortunately now, you don't have to go to a lecture. We're able to use the platforms that we have, and I think we should use them more effectively and more efficiently so that we can provide access to everyone who has got the means, at least, to have a smartphone and can be able to listen. And I think the gap between practice, I mean, I'm the past president of SAIA, and I just know how difficult it is to engage, even at institutional level, with universities in a meaningful way. There's always a kind of a suspicion of each other, both sides, by the way. And I think we need to find ways of breaking that so that, you know, we do not create an environment where our students, who are actually our greatest prize, and
our greatest asset, yes.
Our greatest asset, yes, are kind of left in a state of even more confusion and frustration. So I personally want to thank you for availing yourself for this, and hope that we can take this up at different levels, as you say, because of course the we is problematic. But I still believe that the we should be the people who want to do good, the people who want to create change, the people who want to contribute towards transformation. For me, that's the we I'm talking about.
Leander, I do believe that we are more than those who don't.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
yes.
I agree with you.
Scientifically, numerically, you know,
Yeah.
we outnumber, yes.
Yeah. So,
But I agree with you. Our voices we need to stop whispering. It's time to shout.
Yeah.
Yeah. And be visible to each other.
So I don't know if there's anyone who has more access to questions, because I don't want to exclude anyone who has perhaps asked something specific that we perhaps have missed out. I've not picked up anything. Emmanuel or Attila, is there anything that you'd like me to?
Emmanuel here. I'll just pick up, there's some few from Facebook. One from Dr. Finzi Said there. He says, thanks for a wonderful and very enlightening talk. We should have had this 10 years ago. What does Ms. Mvusi think schools of architecture should be focusing on in the next decade in the continent of Africa? Maybe if Ms. Mvusi, if you can just touch on that, and then I will read the next one. We have less than 10 minutes left, but I think maybe we can touch on this, and maybe the conversation can continue on Facebook too, but I'll read just 2 or 3, then we can wrap it up. So
there's also one on the Q&A as well.
Yes. Okay. Schools of architecture, I think 10 years is too late. What should we be focusing on now? These are not normal times.
I think we lost the connection there.
Yeah. Maybe while she's trying to come back, there's also a note here from a participant that SIRE's current webinar series named Many Voices is another initiative that has started to broaden this conversation. And obviously, being an immediate past president, I'm part of that process, and I think, and I hope that the SIRE series will also be an enrichment to the discussion. Please look out for that series. It's going to be circulated. It is being circulated. We had the first one already, I think on the 4th, if I'm not mistaken. And it's going to continue on a monthly basis.
Monin, do you know what's happening with the connection? I see Ms. Mvusi left. Maybe she would want to join again.
Oratile is with her, so I am not sure. I don't have a clue. I just lost her as you have. I'm not sure if he's going to help her to get back in. I am not near her to be able to assist with that.
I just got a message. They lost power, but they are connecting to solar, so they should be able to join us again. But perhaps in that, because we don't have, I don't know if we can still run over a few minutes, Monin.
No problem.
Okay. I will just check if they're able to connect in the meanwhile. I see there's quite a lot of questions. Yes, I've seen the one in the Q&A. Okay, so I got a message now that she's going to join with the phone. So maybe I should just read that question from the Q&A from Nigile Kate. And it says, what is your comment about foreign qualifications that are usually deemed to be lower by SAQA on evaluation? For For example, someone has completed a BArch 6-year program and they are considered to be senior technologists, not architect by SACAP. I don't know if between Luyanda and Ms. Mvusi want to answer this one, but I'm open to whoever who wants to take it on.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she'll come back on. I mean, I think those are all the engagements we need to have. I qualified abroad myself in Germany, and I had to go through the SACAP kind of process, and I had no issues. I think it's just a discussion, and part of what Linda is saying, that we do need to forge stronger relations with other African countries so that we can actually understand how, because every country has got its own kind of values. I'm standing in for you.
Thank you.
And I think between SAIA and SACAP and universities, we need to find a medium through which we can deal with these issues, because we cannot resolve them on our own. And I mean, if you've got a 6-year degree, there must be something wrong that you are classified as a senior technologist. I wouldn't understand that. I also don't understand our own system in South Africa, whereby, for instance, students who've got BArch or BAS as it is called, basically having done the first 3 years and need to do their prac year, their honors, and then their masters, are regarded as technologists. I don't understand why that is the case. And I think this lies in also this whole thing that we have kind of collapsed universities and what used to be technicons into all wanting to be universities of some kind, and not be honest about the importance of the technicon type education as a key component of architectural teaching. It's not inferior. It's a specific skill set that is required and that is important in the delivery of architecture. And not everyone will be a top designer and an academic. I started at Technicon myself in South Africa, and then went on to do, obviously in exile, I did my degree. So I mean, we also have a very confused system in general, which I mean is creating all this confusion. How we can solve it, I really do not know, but I think we have to engage and have this discussion so that we can hopefully at some point get to a point where we understand exactly what we should be doing.
Thank you, Leander. I'm going to read the last 2 questions, and I'm aware that there's more comments, but because of time, we have to cut it down. The other one, I've got one there from Monine, and where is it now? So the question is, mentorships in South Africa seems to be of real concern. Ms. Linda, is it only in SA, or is it the same all over Africa and even globally? Then do you want to answer it first? Then I'll read the last one.
It's been some time since I've been directly involved in mentorship of university students. When we formed the Association of Black Architects in 1993 in Johannesburg, part of our task was, and I was delegated to sit on the universities because they were going through some very dramatic transformations, especially at WITS. And it was very difficult to understand because I come out of the RIBA, Royal Institute of British Architects system, not just from the UK, but most countries which were colonized by Britain adopt that. So there is a sort of universal benchmark, whether you're in Hong Kong, Far East, or, you know, anybody who's come through that system, it becomes a sort of unifier. I'm not suggesting that it's the best, but what concerns me is the benchmarking. I know that in the 1990s, for the first 5 years, my practice took on quite a bit of mentoring here in the studio, and 2 VIT students, in fact, and also technician students. But I'm not familiar with what other practices were doing at the time, bearing in mind that we were in a recession. But if I can link this to something which Luanda was saying earlier, as we're cut off, was that we also need to bring to the party what we call we need to bring in the private sector. The private sector is sitting on a lot of investments. We have to find a mechanism, and especially in construction, architecture, design, that field, where the private sector invests in academia, invests in students, and actively takes on students for holiday jobs, vacation jobs, actual vocation jobs. If I look at, someone asked, is that the same in outside South Africa? My first job in architecture, I was offered mid-air in a plane. A European man came down from the business class and said, I saw you getting on the plane with a portfolio in a T-square. Where are you going? Zambia. Says, well, I'm head of public works department. We're opposite the High Court, next to the broadcasting studios. Come in when you're ready. So every year, in the 4 years that I was studying in Ghana, I had a real active hands-on job. The first project I did was 3D perspective drawings for the National Veterinary Council. And it's immeasurable what that kind of tactile, real-time, visceral working in a studio does for the student, whether they're a technical or university, what it does to you, what you know, because you know it because you're doing it, you know. So I would say we have to bring in, this is not a binary thing. We have to bring in companies. It's the companies that benefit from graduates of technicons and universities. We have to find a way. We have to find a way. And maybe we need to invite them to participate in finding the way.
Look, I'll just add, Linda, that talk about mentoring. I mean, for me, the biggest problem I've experienced is the number of applications I get, and I'm not able to take all of them, because I believe that it is our obligation as practitioners to give students practical experience. And I also don't take the best necessarily. I mean, all the students who've come through me, through our studio, they know. I also take the bad ones and actually take them through the paces, you know, because
it's reward, isn't it? Because the improvement is dramatic.
Okay.
Yes.
But it is our responsibility. But 2 things I just want to say on this. As practicing architects, I mean, I learned my craft, of course, at university in Berlin, but I learned it also in the firms that gave me the opportunity to do practicals and to work, you know, in an environment that gave me what I know today, actually. And without this, we can never build a strong architecture, fraternity, and movement. It's impossible. But 2 things happen. One, I tried a number of times to speak to my university here under the mountain, the School of Architecture, that, you know, there's certain opportunities I want to open up for students. And And at the time, my practice was very small. And when they told me what I must pay the students, the university saying, this is what you must pay the students, otherwise you are basically exploiting them. I actually felt that there's a misunderstanding of what practicals actually mean, because in Berlin where I worked, you work for almost nothing as long as you have the opportunity and be happy with whatever you offered. But here, it's like there's an expectation that this is what you must pay students. So that's the first problem. But the second one, and the bigger one, is that apprenticeship as a practice in South Africa is lost. It is not promoted as it should. And I think this is something where I agree with you fully, Linda, that something has to happen, because as practitioners, we can't carry. I mean, I tried, for instance, to use the government SETA system to say, okay, I can take 6 students, no problem, but someone must fund it. And it is a disaster. It doesn't work for architecture. And I mean, as president of SAIA, I've been trying as much as I could to engage with departments and stuff. No one even listens to us, you know. So there's something very wrong in the system that we need to keep fighting to engage with those who have an ear for us, engage in these discussions and engage with academia, so that we can all try and find the best way to deal with these issues.
May I suggest a design think process, and probably invite into the wide circle what I'll call free agent, because we need to tackle the commanding peaks of the problem. We need to have like an open conversation about, do we really need a Ministry of Housing? Just put the question out there. Those kinds of questions. We need to look at the economy, you know. We're citizens as well. The sun shines on our heads equally. And it comes back to what I was saying earlier about, we need a participatory process, you know. One thing which amused me about South Africa when I arrived was that because I'm African, there was an assumption that, oh, I'll just have African projects. Like, what is an African project? Or, you know, because you're a woman, okay, you're gonna have a woman project. What's a woman project? You know, I remember was it the Soweto City Council, if there was such a thing, with the hostels. And there was a little hostel, Orlando West Women's hostel. And everybody assumed that I'm the woman architect, so I'll do this Orlando Women's hostel. Except for the very angry Zulus in Jabulani hostel, which is one of the biggest hostels. They said, Sifuna Siswet. So I had 2 days in that violent, I think it was Inkatha dominated at the time, with these Nobkiri and Panga wielding guys. They put all their, you know, and they were explaining in detail how they wanted to live. So I would say, yes, the private sector, corporations, the big ones, they've got the money. They must come into this circle called education. But we also need to bring in what Hillary Clinton called everyday people, which is what I call regular people. We need to bring in those guys from the Jabulani hostel, because they know how they want to live and they contribute to the brief, not just to the brief, but what they have to say affects the southern part of Johannesburg, for instance. We have to open it up. We need to get more complex, yes.
But Linda, I will I will say to you that the biggest frustration I have is that what you and I are talking about, people are excluded in the teaching of architecture in South Africa, as a matter of fact. People don't exist. And these are the skills I'm talking about that, you know, when I did the 10 by 10 house, the sandbag house, right? Which, I mean, in the architecture field was not regarded as architecture at the time, but the rest I want to talk about now. So I went to my university here under the mountain, and I said, you know what, I think we have to start some electives on, you know, design, which would be looking at the lower end of the economy in terms of how can we take the 10 by 10 sandbag prototype and take it to the next level, because I'm pretty sure there's a lot that could come out of it. Not because of me, but because of the thinking that goes behind projects like those. So the answer I got was, we don't do housing. This was 10 years ago, right? And this is the problem we have. We've got a very preconceived idea of what architecture is. And we do not engage with the real issues, the day-to-day regular issues, because architecture is not elitist. It was never meant to be, but we've made it to be elitist today. So it's part of the frustration that we really need to find a way that we bring this message across. Fortunately, it's happening by itself now, because the kids, I'll use that word, are really taking
decolonizing
themselves, yes, and are bringing these issues into the stream of thinking. So the environment, I think, now is fertile for these discussions to happen, and we have to provide the experiences we've made, without fear that you're going to be regarded as not really being woke enough in terms of the current architecture kind of thinking. So I'm very grateful for the things that you've brought and that enable us to discuss at this level.
Thank you. Let me quickly also add.
Sorry to interrupt. We're running out of time, but I wanted to read the last question, then allow for a wrap up. But I'm going to let you just say what you wanted to say now, then I will read the last question, then we wrap it up. We're at 8:15 now, but I think if we can just wrap it up for the session. Thank you. Thanks.
This is very quick. For countries to progress, and I'm not even using the word economy, GDP, the gross domestic product of our country, 2% of it must be committed to R&D, research and development. Germany under past President Merkel, I think they were 2.9. China, the Republic of China is 3.5. You know, this is numbers. So what I'm saying is that we need people who will climb and tackle the commanding peaks. We need to demand at the level of treasury, where is the 3DP, not even 3%, 2%, because we're under 1%. We are way down below 1%. This government has to commit, and the private sector has to commit 2.5% of our GDP. What is our GDP now? Is it, I know we are way below Nigeria, but if it is 300 billion US dollars, we want 2.5% of that in research and development across the board.
Yeah. Thank you. So Emmanuel, last question, maybe?
Okay, I'm going to take last question. I recognize that there are other very interesting comments and very useful comments. So, but because of time, we I cannot take all the questions. So I'm going to take the last one from Facebook. Tisetso Mahlebiane, she is, I'm assuming there's two questions there. Thank you for the very informative lecture. Your journey is inspiring and your knowledge and wisdom is profound. My questions are, question number one, what excites you most about architecture? And then question number two is, what are you trying to achieve with the spaces you design or create? And we'll end it at that. And then I'll let Leander to wrap up everything for us.
I won't answer the second one because I think I've attempted to in the lecture. What excites me about architecture is it's the ability to add value and beauty where it doesn't exist and where none was expected. Yes, that's what excites me about architecture, about design thinking. Thank you for the question.
Well answered. Over to you, Leander. You may do the benediction as discussed.
Yeah, I don't think my benediction would do justice, after such an inspiring presentation and lecture and sharing of wisdom. The first is to thank Linda for availing herself, but I think that what I take away myself from this is that there's a lot that we need to do to tease out. We are students and practitioners in architecture and spatial thinking. We need to tease out the things that are going to profile our profession in a more beneficial way to ordinary people, but also to engender that sense of responsibility, which I think architects have, to be the agents of change as well. Not just creators of beautiful buildings, but to be agents of change. And that change is about how do we redefine our spaces? How do we identify a little bit more with our own traditions and heritage and not look outside of where we are to think that architecture is just about the beauty. And I think that the journey that Linda took us, just talking about her experiences in the different countries she lived in, actually shows that there's a different kind of beauty there that we still have to discover. We have not become comfortable with our own sense of beauty in our own country. We have allowed the profession to alienate itself from the realities of South Africa, let alone the realities of Africa. And I think as we move ahead, we need to be conscious first of those realities and then engage at the different levels to kind of get to the point where Linda says, we need to aggregate, we need to look at complexity of society, but also look at the simplicity of finding solutions as well. Because as much as the situation is as complex as it is, these things are not difficult, really, to be honest. They just need that coherence and collective action. And we need to find ways to do actionable stuff. We don't just need to theorize and think about very difficult questions. So I'm very excited about the lecture series, and I would like to encourage, whilst you are away, Linda, I was reminded of the SIA series as well, which is called Many Voices, that has started with the new president, Kate Otten. And I think it's starting to address these very issues that you've talked about. What are the voices out there? How should we kind of extend them? How can we broadcast them so that this information gets to the public, gets to the regular person? I'm working on a very interesting project, informal settlement in Cape Town. The first thing I did was to bring the community representatives to my office for a design workshop over a weekend. And we went through a design process. Fortunately, they were not carrying knob kiri's and pangas.
You're very fortunate.
So we go through these things, and you actually understand that as an architect, sometimes it's okay to take a step back. Let the people speak. Let them bring to you their ways of life, their ways of living. They've created an informal settlement without you. And it's a very complex entity when you walk into an informal settlement. And you need incredible patience to understand the complexities of those networks that they've created. To me, that is the essence of architecture, nothing more. But obviously, if you want me to design an embassy, I'll do it. If you want me to design a hotel at the waterfront, I'll do it. But that's not all. So Linda, I think that if anything, I really like to just applaud you for the resilience and the fact that you've not given up. I was wondering and worried about you. Where is she? So thank you very much for sharing your wisdom with us. And thanks to TUT, of course. Emmanuel has been very much behind this, and Oratila, and let's hope it continues and succeeds. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words. And let's continue the conversation. It's more than 2 decades you and I have met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's not wait another 20 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Manuel?
Thank you so much. Thank you to you both. In our culture, we say we shouldn't only meet in the funerals. We should meet around good things too. So this feels like a very good thing to meet around. Yeah. So I would also like to thank PIA. I don't know if Monin, you want to say closing words, then we wrap it up. We'd just like to thank all the participants, those who attended on this platform and as well in the Facebook live streaming. You will be able to go back and listen to this presentation. It was recorded. So please make use of that. I do hope that both, I know Linda is very active on Facebook, so I hope she will continue to engage with the comments on Facebook and expand the discussion. Unfortunately, we couldn't get a lot of our of her US contacts that we hoped will join here, but I'm sure there'll be other opportunities in the future to continue similar conversation, because when I listened to her recent talk in New York, there's a lot of similarities in the issues you're discussing here and what you discussed there, and from what Jack Travis discussed in that lecture that you presented. But thank you so much. Over to you, Monin, and we can close it up. Sorry, we ran over time, and but I hope it was an engaging discussion, and we touched on very useful issues for the discipline and for the profession at the moment. Thank you so much from TUT.
Well, thank you to you all, and thank you, TUT. I don't think that anyone really minded you running over a bit. It was a really lovely and engaging conversation, and at least there was no silences, Luyanda, so no one had to try and make this work. So as long as the conversation was flowing, it was great. So thank you very much. Have a lovely evening, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda, and thanks everyone. And it's been a worthwhile evening, and I think there's a lot.
I enjoyed it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And thank you to the people who logged in.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks to the audience, of course, yes.
So.
Okay, thank you.